Peace, 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 and welcome to the Origins of Om podcast. I'm your host, Om Maya, and today we are on our very last episode of season 1, and the topic is on the principles of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. Let's get into it. I really wanted to take out some time with this topic as far as how I wanted to articulate it back to the listeners, because automatically when you go into gender, you think about a male and a female, right? And it has nothing to do with the physical aspect or perception of things. A lot of those words have been created over the years anyway to create division. And so when we really look into the origins of gender, we're talking about the masculine, feminine. We're talking about the masculine, which is the positive pole, and the feminine, which is the negative pole. And this isn't a good or bad thing. It's pretty much like saying the masculine is the electricity, the electric aspect of existence, and the feminine is the magnetic, which, if you think about it, when you start to practice more meditation, you notice how you get really comfortable and relaxed in the body, and you start to notice the energy in your body, the frequencies that move in the body, the tingling sensations, or maybe it's a very numbing, relaxed type of energy, or maybe it's a fiery type of energy. And these attributes coincide with the masculine energy. Yet, this can go a little deep, so I'm not going to throw everybody off. I just want to make a point about the understanding of it, and then you can go on into the book of Kabbalion and really just, it's going to take a while, especially if you're not ready and you're in judgment about certain things. It's going to take a couple of reads before it clicks. I'll put it this way. The feminine is like matter. It's the things that you see with your two eyes, right? Or your two lenses. So you can see and perceive, you can touch it, you're aware of the physical manifestation of it. That is the feminine energy, the magnetic, the attraction. You get attracted to a flower, you get attracted to the trees, you get attracted to the things that are manifested. And then you have the masculine, which is the internal, the energy, the electric, right? And this is subtle a lot of times. This, a lot of people say, it doesn't have a significance, but you can't have one without the other. And so I wanted to go into the root meaning, the Latin, which is the original meaning of things. That is not an ancient thing. It is a now thing. And I'm speaking to you in now time about what the principles of gender are, because it's easy to perceive our reality as a today, tomorrow, yesterday type of thing when that doesn't exist. And what happens is you're caught up in this constant vicious whirlwind or cycle of interpretation, because you think, well, this was what it was yesterday or years ago, and it's not that today, but it is. And the ones that know this operate in power, and they operate from a space of leadership, because they are aware that spirit is where we make things manifest. Spirit is where our original existence is, right? And so the Latin root meaning of gender is to beget, to recreate, or to procreate, right? And to generate, to produce. What's happening now is that the controllers are the people in power of the social system, right? They're going against creation. They're going against the mother. And the amount of hate that people have for themselves is reflecting in all of this identity crisis that's happening. The lack of really wanting to even pursue spiritual development is major. You'll have majority that are not interested in that because they're not ready to come into that light, that awareness. And so I personally am learning to not get annoyed or frustrated when I see things out of harmony or I see things that are not the way that I perceive them to be, the way that I know. Look, if you were to transform the way that you thought or perceive things, you wouldn't have this emotional disconnect with yourself and others, right? And so, speaking in the now time, right? Knowing that everything goes against the mother. We're not talking about feminine, masculine. We're not talking about it. We're talking about the mother, the great mother, the mother of nature, the mother of creation, the mother and father who plays a major role, or the masculine that plays a major role in the reproduction. Because what happens is when the feminine energy ignites, okay, it needs the masculine energy, the opposite, right, in order to reproduce an atom. And the atom, right, has the masculine and feminine poles in it. So when you think about the existence of the soul is both masculine and feminine. But what's happening is a lot of people go, exactly, this is why, we should have a right to be whatever we want to be, right? And sure, express yourself how you please. Yet, remember that when you're not in harmony with nature, a lot of a lot of things in life become out of balance, whether it's your health, your thinking, right? The emotional aspect of your life, how you feel always like you need some type of approval from someone or you need to feel accepted. That force of accept me as I am is really a cry out for the self wanting to be connected to the I, the EYE, or the center. And so what happens is everyone's forcing their beliefs or their ideology with each other. I want you to, love me for where I am and who I am. And the truth is that for all mankind, one must love themselves first. One must say, I appreciate my body. There's absolutely nothing wrong with my body, even though television and celebrities and social media has placed this impression on people's minds. The truth of the matter is that we are all made so creatively, whether you've had children, whether you're just, someone who's battling with your weight or your looks or, just whatever, your appearance in any way, to say something is wrong and I need to fix that, right? I need to correct it by getting someone else to alter my body or to alter my facial structures or whatever, is to say that mother made a mistake. And mother doesn't make mistakes. If you look at a flower, you're going to look at that flower and say, oh, that flower is a mistake. It grew wrong. No, you're going to see it for what it is. And you're going to appreciate it for what? Its colors, its expression. And even just in nature in general, if you look at a tree, trees come in all different forms. They come in all different shapes and sizes. But do we look at a tree and say, oh, something's wrong with this tree and it needs to be corrected? Oh, it's leaning all the way down to the ground and it needs to be sitting straight up. Or it's sitting too high up and it needs to be curved down so I can reach it. Like there's no selfishness when it comes to observing nature, because we accept things as they are, right? So why is it so hard for man to accept themselves as they are? Why does it have to be, you know, a battle between the people to say, love me for my color of my skin, or love me for my choice of who I choose to love, or love me for whatever. I mean, why does it have to be this division amongst ourselves? And it's not, it's like you can't see it until you are actually in the experience. And then when you're in the experience, the real fight is with yourself. It gets to a point where if you're comfortable in your skin, you're comfortable in your own body, then what's going on in the world and what's happening to everything else around you shouldn't affect you. It's just like if you remember your dreams, if you're a person that's really good with remembering dreams, and I'm pretty good at that, I realize how I am always the observer, right? Most of the time, because I'm practicing being more observant in this realm. In my dream state, I'm literally just remote viewing, where I'm just witnessing the show go down in front of me. And even though I'm aware that I might be manifested as a body character in the dream, and I might also interact in the dream, I'm never truly affected, right? But if you notice when you're dreaming, and a lot of times you might have an emotional dream because you're so strong in your emotions in the waking state, that when you go into the dream world, you tend to bring that same energy and thought with you into the dream world. And that has a lot to do with how you're thinking before you go to bed. But not to get off track. The mental agony that's going on in the world today, the confusion, the battle between, these ups and downs, and that has to do a lot with tuning into what's being televised, what's being socialized in the now. And the trick of the trade is to pull yourself out of those constructs, because they create a distortion in the brain. They create a compartments in the mind and separate itself from your own existence. And so one minute you can be in a good mood, happy, having a good time, and then someone says something or you see something that triggers you, and then you drop into a state of an emotional perception where now you're feeding into that emotion, and it's taking over your day, it's taking over how you feel, and you're attracting that type of energy, right? And so a lot of overindulgence in food and sex and TV and social media and gatherings, all that overstimulating, right? All that overstimulant causes an imbalance between the positive and negative poles, the masculine and feminine poles. If I'm tuning way too much into the world, if I'm witnessing way too much of what's going on in the world, I'm neglecting the inner masculine aspect of myself. I'm not generating any electro waves. I'm almost being used as a vessel to generate emotions and happiness and all this stuff, not even at my own will, but at the will of whatever I give my power to. And so, just to be clear, gender has nothing to do with sex, okay? That's a physical distinction for operation in the physical plane. And that's where people identify with male, female characteristics. Now, the false depiction that's given by science, and also just how we think, period, right, is that masculine is something that's strong and that's real, right? And feminine is something that's negative and it's unreal and it's weak, and that's not true, right? That comes from a space of being in a patriarch type of way of thinking, that everything was man. Everything started with, what is it in the Bible? The Father, the Son, and then what is this Holy Spirit that people miss out on, not understanding the Holy Spirit as a feminine Shakti energy, right? And so the beauty of it all is when you really get down to it, if you start really going all logical in it, you'll be like, well, then there's really no masculine and feminine, right? Right. When you hear the story, if you've ever studied Hindu, you hear the story about Shakti and Shiva. One of the beautiful things about just energy in general is for me personally, it came to this light of dancing, intimate waltz dancing, just being immersed in love and intimacy and joy and soothing, right? And then this power of fire that comes in and it just wraps itself around you and you're just immersed in life, breath and all that is, so that it doesn't have a separation. It's as one. It's like the magnet. You put the positive and negative together and what happens? Bam, they come together. But if you put a negative and a negative together, what happens? There's restriction, right? There's a resistance there. And if you flip it and flip it to the other side and you put the positive and the positive together, there's also that friction there. It can't come together. So when we look at how we move out here in our character body and we have these opinions about, who's living right, who's not, there's a moment of dispelling all of that, because it's really about not forcing your opinions on others, allowing people to be in their experience and in their way, but not not so much trying to get other people to convert to what you believe or to accept you for what you believe. I don't care if you believe or accept anything I say. I don't really care about that. What I care about is you going and researching this for yourself and then shining that awareness as you develop and practice it on your own in your personal life so that you can help others. Because the work that you do is you came here with that promise. You came on this plane with the promise to do the service for others and to help uplift humanity. When the masculine, which is the electric or positive pole, combines with the feminine, the negative pole or magnetic, right? There's this union that manifests. It's like light and heat and electricity and magnetism and attraction and repulsion and this chemical affinity. And so this is a part of the principle of gender on the plane of energy. You can't have one without the other. They say, they have this saying, men, you can't live with them, you can't live without them. And it goes vice versa. Women, you can't live with them, you can't live without them. That's bull crap. That's because you got a lot of opinions in your head. You got a lot of these distinctions of things, and something's wrong, and it needs to be corrected, it needs to be fixed. And so you can't see the true beauty in that individual because you're caught up in this rapture, this kidnapping of the mind that keeps you in prison in what's this division, this duality of good and bad. When you dispel all that, you could truly see the beauty in people, period. And even though there's a lot of more ignorant people out here who are not aware of their existence and why they're here, you know, the truth is that everyone's going to have their time to ascend. No one is exempt from that either. So to be like, oh, you know, you're coming back into this realm, or, you know, or whatever stories you tell people, you're going to hell, whatever. It doesn't matter. Everyone started from the bottom and is coming up to the top. Everyone. And you can't experience one experience without the other. So if you haven't suffered, if you haven't went through any struggles or any suffering in this lifetime, then you're due to pay that up. Maybe not in this lifetime, maybe in the next. That's why a lot of gurus, a lot of teachers that I've heard of and I've listened to and I've read about, they may have grown up in a dynasty, but they've chosen to go off into the mountains or go off the grid somewhere or go through certain sufferings in order to balance out their karma, right? So now, if people come out of their distinctions of the male and female, then they can see that it was never about an identity with the masculine and feminine, right? Because the masculine energy is the internal and the feminine energy is the external. So what's going on is that you're experiencing only yourself through these two lenses that you call eyes, but really you only have one eye. And that eye is infinite. That eye is the observer. That eye goes from this dimension into multiple dimensions of life. I've seen God at the lowest of my life when I was ignorant and dumb and didn't have any sense of wisdom to start off with. And God was always present all the way up until this moment here now. And at this moment here and now, I and the Father are one. Because now I am seeing with my eye, not my lenses. I perceive with my lenses, but I have practiced not reacting to a lot of what's going on out here. And that's a constant practice because, you know, I see where I still have my opinions. But that's a part of growing. And the desire to no longer hold on to those opinions is what separates you from the majority. Right? Because there's a pleasure in negativity. There's a pleasure in just being in the feminine, sensual manifestation of matter. And what's happening is this realm promotes the 3 lower chakras, okay? Which is your root chakra. That's the sexual organ, okay? Then you have the solar plexus, and that part has everything to do with your appetite. So, you know, if your hunger is for food and sex and just pleasures that make you feel good, right? Then you also have to suffer with your health. And and that's your 3rd chakra. So what happens is you're going into these distinctions, but you never can get to the heart. You never can get to the space of compassion because you're still caught at the lower frequency. Who's to say that's not hell? Hell can be fun. You've been in it long enough. You know, I mean, you're having a good time, you know, burning up all of your good prana and all of your good aspects of your health and your body. And you're not aware of it. You know, you're in this denial that you're really suffering inside. And so until you really open up, if you ever think about when you have a moment, maybe when you were in church and you had a moment of worship or healing, someone prayed over you, or maybe you were in a practice of yoga and you had a heart opening experience and you broke down in tears. You remember that feeling. You remember that ecstasy, that bliss, that freedom, that openness, that you felt like this was the real you and that everything else didn't even matter at that time. You had a moment of compassion for yourself for the lack of knowledge or for the lack of wisdom and understanding of your true existence. That was the soul crying out. The soul is like when we were little, We played together. We got to know each other. We created so many magical realities, and nothing harmed us at that time. But then something happened to you. And then you held on to that experience and you were afraid to move forward in life. And so a lot of people are, children in adult bodies. They're still in their trauma. They're still stuck at the age of 5 when they were molested or when they were abused, or they're still stuck at the age of 17 when something tragic happened in their lives, or they got pregnant or whatever. And so they made it mean something wrong. And I remember when I had, I had gotten into my first marriage and I had my children. I remember at first I'm like, dang, am I this woman who has 4 children and, my husband left me? Damn. Okay, well, I guess that's my story. So that's the story that is being generated, but it's not my story and I'm not holding on to it. I'm going to recreate my reality of how I want that to look with children. And it doesn't mean that I have to work 2 jobs to try to take care of my family in order to survive this world. It was, I'm going to balance my life out because I realized a long time ago that I had to come first in order for me to be available to my children mentally, emotionally, and physically. If I had only poured myself into my children, then neglecting myself, I'd have all these health issues. I would have all these mental issues. I'd be exhausted because I'm always giving myself away and don't even know who and why I'm here, And it was like Spirit always made sure that I held on to that innocence, my soul, because I wanted to be relatable to my children in a way. I wanted to be available to my children. And maybe that looked like time away to go practice in the mornings, while they're at school and, do things for myself that felt good. And then when I presented myself to them when they got out, emotionally and mentally, I was available. And then maybe by the time they're done eating dinner and they're done taking their baths, all right, y'all going to bed early so I can have the next 2 hours to myself before going to bed. Because if I'm just throwing myself into my children all day long, for one, they don't get the opportunity to have their own identity or their own experience or their own, way of seeing life because they're always witnessing me. And then children mimic their parents. So I allowed them a lot of time to be in their rooms or in the living room or wherever in the house to, be with themselves while I'm with myself and I'm developing myself in a better light so that when I come to them, I'm not in my opinions. I'm not attacking them for something, because I'm mad at myself about something or I'm mad at their dad about something. Like I had to do a lot of healing and clearing so that I didn't have all that in the way for them. And as we grow older together, I see how beautiful they have become mentally and emotionally and even physically. The wisdom that they carry when they are at school and how they communicate with their teachers is at a level that most children can't even articulate, And so when I met my beloved, this is where all those practices of me getting to know the soul and loving myself and loving the life that I was in and loving the beauty of nature and just being with it all, it was literally like looking at the divine mother, the divine Shakti manifested in this man. And I remember Divine Mother saying to me, just keep your eyes on me, keep your heart on me. and everything will flow beautifully. Don't take your eyes off. You know, don't get caught up in the image of the individual, but the spirit of the individual. Look how beautiful that spirit is. That spirit is me made manifested. And it's me, right? Or the I made manifested in front of me. And no one can tell me that that's not real and that's not true because it's there in front of me. It was like, if you didn't believe then, you believe it now. You know now. You know now that the masculine and the feminine energy is always present, but until you tap into it in yourself, you'll be this lonely single person needing validation from the world, needing acceptance from other people. And to be honest with you, you'll never get the genuine love because everybody feels some type of way about the way you live your life because they're not living it that way. They're living it their own way. And if they know themselves, then we're all one together and we're all at peace with each other and there's no fight. But a lot of people are friends with people because they're attracted to them, or their relationships with them only because they're attracted to them. It doesn't go past the attraction, the physical attraction, the sexual attraction. And so when I hear a lot of couples that do talk about, you know, why they love their partners or whatever, I notice it's only physical. They may say she's beautiful, you know, and that's one of the things I when I was dating, I would always test out. What do you like about me? You're funny, you're smart, you're pretty. Yarn. I'm a deep type of woman. So I like you know, I like you going to my soul. You know what I mean? Talk to me from there. And when I met my beloved and he asked me, do I know who I am? That really was the fucking kicker for me. It was like, yes, I know who I am. And it didn't have a name. It only was manifested in a body. I am divine mother manifested in this physical body. I come here to speak and to give nothing but the truth because I want to be a living vessel for the Divine Father to use my tongue, my words as a sword. And I ain't go that deep with him, but he knew what was up when I let him know that I was Divine Mother and the fact that I existed in all things. And when I see him, I see the masculine, right? Yet he's in tune with the feminine. So when I was a lot of times going through a lot of the shadow work and I needed that support. I needed that, you know, that those words of wisdom. He was there to give that. You know what I mean? He was pouring that into me. And all his life, he had been pouring that into other people. And, you know, doing the same work I was doing. You know, I'll go and, you know, if I'm on a date with somebody or whatever, hanging out with people, I'm always pouring love into people. I'm always pouring wisdom into people. So when we met each other, it was a bit overwhelming the first time because our energies were so big that we were literally vibrating physically in front of each other. And when he would leave, you know, to go back home and or I visit him and I left to go back, you know, fly back home. It was this sense of longing to be one, to be back together. So our energies are really big. Like God had to really show me, like, look what you could create from your mind, from your eye. When you come out of your own appearance and identity and distinctions of how you're supposed to look. And, you know, trying to cover your face with makeup and hair and clothes and not really allowing your light within to beam so bright that you look like you have a glow or you look like you're pregnant, but you're not. You're just a glowing light. And I'm going to leave that there. This has been a very exciting time for me because when Spirit showed me that it was my words and my communication that I'm called to give more of, I was kind of annoyed at first because I got comfortable with being quiet and allowing information to dive in. And to be honest, what I express on the podcast is at the level of interpretation that works for the majority. But if I'm having a one-on-one with someone, or I'm having an intimate connection with someone, it dives way deeper than the words that I express here, because I see from a different state and I feel everything. I can see the knots in the bodies of people that are blocked because of the way that they are thinking, the way that they are perceiving their reality. And I just want to say this, you know, you're that powerful when you change the way that you think. It doesn't have to look that way. I remember yesterday, I was having a little ache and cramps from, I'm a woman. I still have cycles. So I was having a little cramping, and I went out and sat in the sun and it went away. And, when you really start putting the elements to the test and you start working with nature, you realize you never needed any other substance but the mother. And when you become more intimate and connected to the mother, you become the mother for all. And then when you become the mother for all, then she'll introduce you to the Father. And when you meet the Father, you will dance with the Father. And you will become one with the Father. And you will be like Christ, who says that I and the Father are one. It was an honor and a pleasure speaking with you. Season 2 will be coming out soon. Be on the lookout. Until next time. Later.